right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. We're on RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Apple and Spotify. I'll be joined later by Conan, Byrne and David McMillan, but we're going to start on Vera Pauw's Ireland, having named the squad last week and with a final friendly send-off against France live on RT2 and RT Player on Thursday. Former Ireland manager and current FIFA Women's Football Technical Director Sue Ronan joined me earlier this morning, and we discussed her view on the 23+3 squad, the France game, and the challenge the World Cup will pose. All right, Sue, thanks very much for taking the time to chat to me this morning. And I suppose to start off, what's your overall reactions to the squad that has been selected, the 23+3? Because there were a lot of marginal calls that had to be made there.
There were. I suppose my first reaction was, and still is, that it is a very strong squad. I feel it's a well-balanced squad. We have players that can play in a number of positions. We have players like Megan Connolly, who can play at centre half or centre midfield. Katie McCabe obviously can play wing back. She can play higher up the pitch. She can play in midfield. There's a number of players like that. Heather Payne, another, who can play around in different positions. So I do think it's quite versatile, quite a versatile squad. It's also packed with real quality. I keep saying we have world-class players, and we do. We definitely have two in Denise O'Sullivan and Katie McCabe. It's a pretty settled squad as well, apart from maybe one or two new faces over the last year or so. The nucleus of it has been there for a long time. But yeah, I think overall it has a lot of experience. You have youth there as well. You have the versatile players that I mentioned, and that's obviously very important in a tournament scenario. So yeah, I'm quietly confident we can do well in the group.
Perfect. And let's just listen to Vera Pauw, because, I think the emotions were quite palpable last week, last Wednesday, as she was talking to Tony O'Donoghue about those tough calls one has to make.
Yeah, it's of course devastating. I've broken dreams, and that's devastating. For all the other players were also very much down. It was not a celebration day yesterday.
Yeah, and that was Vera Pauw speaking to our own RTÉ Soccer correspondent, Tony O'Donoghue, last week. And Sue, I imagine you can kind of sympathise with the difficulties of making those type of calls, because, from maybe our point of view, we look at it a very cold, analytical point of view, but you've also got to deal with the, the emotions in terms of like knowing the different characters that exist within a squad and within an overall camp as well.
Absolutely. And it is a very, very tough time for any coach to go through. Of course, it's tough for the players that are left out, but, an awful lot of thought goes into it. It's not a decision that a coach or her staff comes to overnight. As I mentioned, and Vera mentioned herself, I'm sure there were many sleepless nights. There were late nights. There were early mornings. You were sleeping on it. You were going for a walk on it. All the staff would have, had their opinion, put it into the melting pot as such. They would have looked at every single scenario. They would have looked at statistics and training data from the sports scientists. You're weighing up who's coming back from injury, who's on form, who can move around in the squad, as I mentioned, but there is that human side to it. You're going to break somebody's heart at the end of the day. And I suppose up till now, we haven't been a team that have qualified regularly for tournaments. So, this is such a big occasion and such a big event to actually qualify. And I think that maybe probably even made it worse, I suppose, for the players that were left out, that it's the first time we've been there and they really wanted to be part of that journey, So, yeah, there were some very close calls. And I think, I spoke to 3 or 4 friends of mine, and all, very, very informed about the women's game here. I think every one of us picked a different squad. That's how close it was. There's some close marginal calls. But at the end of the day, the coach and her staff have to make that decision. They've done that now. And I think it's time to celebrate who's in the squad and move on and try to support them as best we can.
Yeah, and it's a testament as well, isn't it, to the depth that has been built, because that wasn't always an option. You've talked about the quality that's been available in recent times. Obviously, the stars like Katie and Denise kind of lead the way, but there's been, over the last 3 or 4 years, it seems like an addition of maybe 5 or 6, and it meant players like Leanne Kierlan, Megan Campbell, who would have been shoe-ins, have been, due to injury, partially sort of sidelined.
No, absolutely. And, in my day and the day of other coaches, your starting 11 picked itself. And after that, you're probably, 4 or 5 subs pick themselves, and then you were really, it was not quite a toss-up, but it was very, very close then, or it could have gone any way for the last few players in the squad. But now we have real depth and strength, and that is a testimony to how the game has grown here. And it was such a close call between the players that haven't made it, the likes of Leanne, and other players that have been left out, Saoirse Noonan, players like that, and then those that are on standby, like Jamie Finn. It must have been such a close call for Jamie to miss out, because she's been a stalwart in the campaign, in the qualifying campaign. She started, I think, 6 of the qualifying games. The first one she played a big role in. She played a big role in a couple of friendlies, including the one against Australia in the last 18 months, so that was a big call, and it was a close call. And yeah, going back to your point, it does show that the game has developed hugely here. We now have a huge depth and strength, which is what you want and what you need, and I think that's going to see us now starting to qualify for more tournaments as the years go on.
Yeah, and one of the bolters, Izzy Atkinson is one, but the other is Claire Reardon. And I was looking back, her debut, Cyprus Cup in 2016. I think you gave her debut at the time. It must have been, like, as you see, like, obviously the joy for her, sort of making the squad sort of as a late charger. I imagine you take a bit of satisfaction in that as well, kind of seeing her journey, because she's gone to Germany, obviously, and then, laterally to Celtic as well.
No, absolutely. And when I gave her debut, Claire was still playing in the league here, and she was playing Wexford Youths, and she was playing as a centre forward. And, I always loved how strong she was in the air. She was fearless, really really combative on the pitch, but so strong in the air, such a good competitor, such a determined competitor. And yeah, she was in around my squad, sort of knocking on doors and stuff, and gave her debut. But then she went on with Colin Bell, and I think he encouraged her to look at maybe the centre half position. He saw something in her maybe that others hadn't, and he encouraged her to go to Germany. She like, in fairness to her, I'm sure, like many girls in those days, they were home birds as such, but up and off she went to Germany, and she hasn't looked back, and she's obviously had a very good season with her club in Scotland. I think she was player of the match in the cup final. And like, for her to get in, as you say, bolter out the blue, I'm really, really pleased for her. She's a lovely girl. She's been knocking on the door for a long time. She has that determination. She'll never let you down. And she had a really great game, very good second half, particularly against Zambia. And obviously she's been doing well in training as well. So, it's great for someone like Claire to get on the plane to Australia.
Yeah, and I was just looking through the numbers in the squad. So I think 7 of the squad were players you gave debuts to yourself in your own time, and that includes Katie McCabe, Denise O'Sullivan, sort of the core of what maybe we could call a golden generation. And then I think also Grace Maloney was the other, but she was capped a little bit later on. But when you were calling these players up, could you envisage that there was a core sort of like what we could call a golden generation building there, or was it a little bit too early to tell there, and it was just a case of just individuals who were showing promise at that stage?
Well, we sort of had a bit of a golden generation from that squad that won a medal in the European Championships, the under-17s under Noel King in 2010. They were an exceptional squad. You had Denise in that. You had Ciara Grant now, who's come back in. I also gave Ciara her debut. You had Rihanna Jarrett. Actually, unfortunately, Rihanna's just gone off the landscape, probably through all the injuries she's had, the unfortunate injuries. Claire Shine would have been part of that group. Denise, as we mentioned, Megan Campbell. There was a real good nucleus of players who you thought were a golden generation. They went on, did really well in the World Cup also. They were only narrowly beaten by the eventual winners, Japan, in the quarterfinals. Unfortunately, I suppose the structures weren't there to sustain their growth or to support it the way it needed to be. At the time, certainly the structures weren't here. The league, even in England, wouldn't have been at the level it's at now, far from it. That was pretty much probably just supporting the English players at the time. So the structures weren't there, and it was really only the cream of the crop that were getting to the top clubs and the top leagues around the country, around the world. So it's unfortunate from that point of view. They came along a little bit early, but of course you could see in the likes of Denise and Megan and Kira and other players at that, that time, they were something special. They were going to be really good players. And Katie came along just a couple of years later, and she was part of a very successful team under Dave Connell, the under-19s, and they also got to a semi-final of European Championship in 2014. And again, to get out of the group in Norway, they beat three highly fancied teams: England, Spain, and I think the other one was Sweden. Unfortunately, they were beaten in the semi-final by Holland, and they come up against a very young Vivian Miedema, who's one of the top players in the world now. Unfortunately, is missing out in the World Cup with injury, but she was just blitzing everybody back then. She was also on the national team at the time, playing with the under-19s with Holland and scoring for fun. And unfortunately, we met them in the semi-finals and lost. But yeah, Katie was part of that group, and of course, you knew she was special as well at the time. And look, it's great to see them come through eventually. Well, not eventually. They've been there over the years. They've been knocking on the door, but it's great to see them get the reward, I guess, eventually for how good they are, because players like that deserve to play at the top, on the top stage in the world. And even other players like, Niamh Fahey, Louise Quinn, players like that, Diane Caldwell, they've been around such a long time. They've given so much to the game, to the national team. They've gone all over the world to try and get themselves into the best position to make themselves, to be available for Ireland or to be selected for Ireland, and to put themselves in the best position rather. And, I'm so happy for them as well. They deserve to play at this level.
Yeah, and it means a very experienced back three, obviously, as well, which is going to be key in a major tournament. In terms of Katie McCabe's role, obviously she's been talismanic, but I suppose a lot of the analysis since the squad has been picked has been around Megan Campbell's absence and potentially Katie playing in this left wing back role. Do you expect her to play in that role, or do you expect her to play further forward and have an influence in midfield?
Yeah, I suppose if we go on recent squads, and yeah, Megan is out now, and I suppose she's an unfortunate loss also, because also a very good player over the years, but unfortunately has been, being really hampered by injuries, and her throw in is such a weapon, and it causes so much confusion in the opponent's penalty box, especially up around the goal. But Vera likes Katie coming from deep, and she likes her in that wing back position. And Arsenal player, in sort of a back four as well, maybe a left back rather than a wing back position. So I definitely see her playing in that position. Personally, I like her higher up the pitch. I think she can influence her attack greater from higher up the pitch. I think we lose something when we have her playing in a deeper position. But look, that's the coach's choice at the end of the day, and that's the style of play, and that's the system of play she tends to like. But I definitely see Katie playing in that left wing back position. I'd be surprised if she's employed higher up the pitch. But look, maybe as games go on, things are not going well, maybe the change might come, or she might be pushed further on. But let's see. I guess we might get a bit of an insight in the game against France on Thursday night.
Yeah, and Sinead Farrelly as well, whose story is remarkable in terms of the amount of time she had out of the game. She's come back and then gets a call up for Ireland. I think it played about an hour, but she seems, even in the USA game that she played in, she brought an extra dimension in that midfield, which maybe offsets if Katie McCabe isn't playing in that role. Maybe her ability on the ball maybe is something that will be a boon for Ireland.
No, absolutely. I hadn't heard much about Sinead Farrelly at all, I have to say, before she was called into the squad, and I thought she was exceptional when she played against USA. I thought she looked so comfortable for a player who it seems was out of the game like for up to 8 years. That's incredible. She was out of the game that long, and then after not long back, slotted in against the world champions, one of the best teams in the world, and played like she'd never been away. But very good in possession, very confident in possession, can hold the ball, can find the pass at the right time. So players like that, the likes of her, Denise, of course, is excellent in there as well. I think they're going to be really important players as far as when we're on the ball, because we're going to need to hold it when we have it. We're playing against a couple of the top teams in the world who are very good in possession. So, I think players like Denise, like Sinead, like Katie, they're really going to be vital for us when we are in possession.
Yeah, and facing France obviously is going to be a great test as well in terms of their experience and their quality. What do you make of them? They're an interesting proposition because, of course, Corinne Diacre left the role fairly acrimoniously earlier in the year, and then they brought in Hervé Renard, who has quite a pedigree in the men's game. I mean, he was coaching Saudi Arabia at the World Cup there and inspired them to victory over Argentina and Lionel Messi, which I think nobody would have expected. So it'll be, obviously it's a friendly, it's a send off, but they're going to be, it's an interesting one for Vera Pauw to try and plot her way through, I imagine.
Yeah, it is. And I think, but I think we're really in preparation mode now. The last couple of games, I guess Vera needs to look at players. She needed to see who's going to be on that playing with her. Players needed to get minutes that hadn't got minutes. She was giving players opportunities, which was needed to be done. I think now you're going to see the team maybe more preparing for that opening game against Australia. I would expect, certainly in the first half, the team will be as close as the one that will start against Australia. I'd be surprised if it isn't, barring maybe players that are injured or not injured, but maybe, need a little bit more rest time or whatever. But I think we'll see, we'll get a sneak peek at who maybe will be starting that game against Australia. You look at France, yes, they've been in qualifying games, they've been one of the best teams in the world over the last 10, 15 years. They've had a golden generation of players too. Some coming towards the end of their career now. They're getting on a little bit, but they're an interesting team. They've always sort of flattered to deceive. I think the best they've ever finished was fourth in one of the World Cups, 2011 World Cup. I think they were knocked out earlier than everyone expected in the one they hosted. But they have such a talented bunch of players, But whatever's going on in France or whatever's going on with the team, there always seems to be an issue. And yes, Corinne was sacked earlier in the year, and it seemed to be fairly acrimonious, as you say. This guy Reynard has come in. I don't know anything about him. I'd never heard of him until I saw he was with the team, obviously Saudi Arabia in the World Cup in Qatar. Yes, they had a great win against Argentina. I don't think they won a match after that, mind you, but it was a great win nevertheless. He doesn't have any background in the women's game, so that's always an interesting one. But they have played a couple of games. They beat Canada 2-1 in the April window, I think, at home. And they beat somebody else recently. I can't remember exactly who it was. Might have been Thailand. One of the teams anyway. I think that's in the World Cup. They beat them. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And a couple of the players that had decided to retire under Corinne, or maybe she didn't select them. I'm not sure which it was. Eugenie Le Sommer, who's been really one of their talisman players for a number of years. She's come back and she's scoring goals. Amandine Henry has come back, and Wendy Reynard herself, the captain, and I don't think they're related, herself and the coach, but she's also come back. So yeah, you don't know what you're going to get with them, but they are a very, very good team. They're fifth or sixth in the world. I think they'll really put it up to us on Thursday. They give us a great game, great preparation game for the World Cup. But how France themselves will do in the World Cup, I'm not really sure. I wouldn't like to call it, because they can be hit and miss, but maybe this coach will get something different out of that bunch of players. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's had a bit of success in tournament football in the men's game in terms of like the Africa Cup of Nations. I think Ivory Coast and Zambia he's won it with right. Before, but
yeah. I think they were out of the blue, unexpected. I think he won those.
Especially the Zambia one. But you mentioned France being sort of hard to predict in terms of how well they will do. But if you were to look at the tournament as a whole, who do you have sort of as favourites? Is it the USA as the defending champions, England as European champions, or are you looking a little bit outside of those two?
Personally, I am looking outside those two at the moment. I thought England were absolutely fantastic last year when they won the Euros, and at that point, I thought to myself, yes, these are going to go really well in the World Cup. They could potentially go one step further than they did in 2019 when they got to the semi-final, and they lost to USA. But I think they've been decimated with injuries to key players. I think Beth Mead's a huge loss to them. I think Leah Williamson's another big loss to them. And there's a few big injuries that they have that I think is going to hurt them. USA, for me, I actually don't think USA will win it either. And I know USA tend to plod through, the 3-year cycle up to the World Cup, and they peak and they're ready to go. And I do expect them to play better than they have shown in the last year, because again, they've been up and down, but I think they have a new bunch of players coming through now. Again, they're missing some of their key players, some of their maybe more experienced players through injury. From last year's Euros, I sort of fancied Germany, and I thought to myself, yeah, they'll do well at the World Cup. Now, again, they've gone the opposite. They haven't been setting the world alight in the friendly phase, and I suppose the qualifying phase. But look, it's tournament football. You would expect the teams that always do well, that have that pedigree, the know how to get results, to be there or thereabouts. But I fancy maybe a Germany or Japan. I think there's not a lot being said about Japan. Potentially, you know, they could do well, or maybe even Brazil. Maybe this could be Brazil's time on the big stage. But let's see. I think there's going to be some great football, some great games, and isn't it just wonderful that the Republic of Ireland are there to be part of it?
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose the final point, in terms of the legacy you'd like to see from this tournament from an Irish point of view, like how do you view that? Because of course, this is 50 years in the making to get to a major tournament. I mean, I was at the event where the first team to play for Ireland against Wales back in 1973 kind of came together. So it was nice to see that. And then obviously there's been so many staging points, including the famous press conference from 2017 in Liberty Hall, and there have been steps made since then. But what do you want to see next after this tournament?
Yeah, the game has come so far from back in those days when players, you know, probably put their hands in their own pocket to play, but it was never about that. Players just wanted to play for their country, and it's the same now. Players, of course, just want to play for their country, but if you want to perform, and we've known that for years, but at last the team has been backed. If you want to perform on the top stage, if you want to get to the top stage, you have to have those resources behind the team. You have to, you know, have all the professional aspects around it, and it does have that now. It's a shame the players had to take that stand to really kick on and to move in that direction, but we're at that stage now where I think the players want for nothing probably around the squad. What would I like to see as a legacy? The game is growing here. I'd like to see it grow even more. I'd certainly love to see a professional league here. I really would. We're a bit away from that yet, but I think we're going in the right direction now. It's sort of gone semi-professional this year, but I'd love to see we're in a situation where we have a really good, well-run, vibrant league here where all our top players are playing in it, and you know, they're the role models then for the young girls. The young girls can go and watch them playing for their club, not just when they're here playing for their country, and that's inspiring those thousands of young girls then to want to stay in the game. So yeah, for me, I'd love down the road, and pretty soon down the road, I'd love us to have our own professional league here, and we're playing in, you know, the big stadiums, and yeah, that's the legacy I'd like to see from it.
Yeah, and Australia and New Zealand, of course, less than 3 weeks away now from an Irish point of view. Obviously, the opening game on the 20th of July, Ireland against Australia in that, and of course we'll be bringing live coverage of every single match on RTÉ as the tournament unfolds, and also the match we've just been talking about as well against France live on RT2 and the RT Player from 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, kick-off at 8 p.m. But Sue Ronan, thanks very much for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Raf.
And that is Sue Ronan, former Republic of Ireland manager between 2010 and 2016. And I am joined now by Conan Byrne and David McMillan. And Conan, I know you follow the exploits of the women's team very closely. So I'd be just interested in getting your thoughts on the squad and also how they shape up for the France game.
Look, really looking forward to the France game. It's their final send-off and sold out Tala. It's exactly what they deserve, and like it has been over the last number of months. So really looking forward to the game. And the send-off that they will get. The squad itself, surprised me, Raf, in certain aspects of it. Obviously, the exclusion of Jamie Finn was a massive talking point last week. And looking at the previous couple of days before the announcement was made, all the journalists were picking their 23, and Jamie Finn was in every one of them. And unfortunately, then she didn't make it. And look, it was unbelievable, really. I had a sleepless night thinking about how Jamie was feeling. When the news broke, because having played 6 out of the 9 games, only missing the two Georgia games where it was a dominant display in both games, and then she was suspended for Slovakia, and then coming back in for the playoff win against Scotland where she did really, really well in that makeshift right back position, just shows her versatility. I thought she would have been a nailed on spot like the other journalists that thought so as well, but when you think about it, she missed the 4 games leading up to the squad announcement. Obviously the American games she didn't play in, and I just thought maybe that the Vera was just trying something new with the new players that had been drafted in. But But then when Vera spoke at the announcement that kind of Heather Payne had kind of done really, really well in that position at right wing back, and Kyra Caruso with her technical ability up front, it just made that decision really, really difficult for Vera. And she mentioned it herself that it was the toughest decision to make, but you still feel so hard done by for Jamie with all that she has put in for the Irish team. But then you've got to look at the other players that have grabbed their chance with both hands. Izzy Atkinson, West Ham United player, obviously formerly of Shels, wasn't in the initial larger squad, comes in to train with them at UCD, shows what she's capable of, played in the Zambia game and obviously showed what she can do. And Vera talked about her maturity over the course of that game. And it just goes to show the look that you can have in football. If you just, as I've said before, in terms of my own career, I've always said, like, if you listen to your coach and do exactly what they say, 9 times out of 10 they'll play you. And Izzy has did that to a T. And great to see the likes of Chloe Mustaki, Kira Grant, like really good players. And the other talking point, I suppose, was Leanne Kiernan as well. And I was at the open training session in Belfield before the announcement, before the Zambia game, and they had 11v11, 15 minutes each way, and the game ended 1-0, and the goal was scored by Leanne. Brilliant goal, curled it in from 25 yards out. But as Vera mentioned as well, it's just the stats and her ability for the fitness kind of told in the end. But I suppose that was where the real talking points, I suppose, was Jamie more so than anybody else. I know Leanne as well, and the injuries to Aoife Mannion. But it was a really difficult decision for Vera, I'm sure, to leave the players out. But now that that's behind us, now we just have to focus on the 23 that are there, congratulate them immensely for that wonderful achievement of being in that squad, and be fully behind the team now going to New Zealand and Australia, starting with France next week.
Yeah, and the Zambia game the previous week, so that one was a lot more experimental in terms of the lineup, and I think obviously there were players still fighting for places. What do you expect to see in terms of the France game? Because again, I'd say they'd want to be avoiding like injuries or overloading players. So do you expect sort of like a semi experimental lineup of the 23 plus 3 that are there, or how do you think Vera will deploy them?
I'd like to see her play her full strength team starting off, because they're coming up against Australia in a sold out arena next month. So I think you need to start your strongest team just to see how they are, how they gel. It's be very difficult going into a tournament when you haven't played your starting 11, your favorite starting 11. And I mentioned Jamie Finn, like she would have been in the qualifying campaign, she would have been in the starting 11. So she hasn't picked her 1 to 11 yet. That she feels as if that's going to compete at the World Cup. So I'd like to see the starting off. Obviously, with injuries and things like that, you don't want it to creep into the squad. So you'd probably leave it at that 45 minutes to an hour, and then make some changes after that to see how it goes. But that's what I'd like anyway. I'd like to see a strong lineup against France.
Yeah, and then on the domestic front, Shelbourne are in Champions League action. So they have the draw for the first round of the qualifiers was done, but they're facing Glasgow City. And that looks like a very tough draw given Glasgow's pedigree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned Izzy Atkinson before. She actually played for them before she signed for West Ham. So that game's on the 6th of September. And if they win that, then they play Gintra of Lithuania or Cardiff City. Another tough task in that. So look, they played last year as well in the competition. They won their first game. They bet ZNK 1-0 and then lost to the Icelandic team Valor 3-0. And that was with a stronger squad. I feel like they've lost Jess Gargan, they've lost Abby Larkin. Obviously Jessie Stapleton now has left as well. So they're big players that would have been starting in that game. And it's going to be very, very difficult for them to compete, I think, at this level, especially against Glasgow. But the emergence of 15-year-old Hannah Healy has been excellent. Kayla Hamrick as well has come in from America, and she's done really, really well. So optimism, but up against it, I'd say, Raf.
Yeah, and then interestingly, the Avenir Sports Cup as well, or Avenir Sports All Ireland Cup. So this is the amalgamated competition that's being played at the moment between the teams in the league down here, the League of Ireland, and then those from Northern Ireland, of course, as well. It's got to the semi-final stage, and what we've found now, Cliftonville playing Cork City and Wexford Youths against Galway United. Interestingly, looking at it from certain teams, it's been good for Cork City and Wexford, who have had sort of underwhelming seasons, particularly Wexford, who tend to compete at the higher end, and Cork City, who have struggled over the last few seasons.
Yeah, they've done really well in this competition, and it was great to see Dermot Usher up at Seaview there in their 1-0 win against Crusaders. It was fantastic to see, and Fiona Bradley obviously getting the only goal of the game to put them through into the semi-finals. The only problem with Cork City is that they've, after being up in Seaview in Belfast last Saturday, they have to go up again to Cliftonville this weekend. And I'd like to see a kind of like a festival of football here for this semi-final of the All-Ireland. Why not play it in like Lizzie Woolen and have the 2 games on back to back and create a bit of an atmosphere and build the All-Ireland Cup into something unique. And that's what I would have liked to have seen. But look, Wexford host Galway as well. Going to be a fascinating game. Galway on the back of a fantastic 2-0 win against Shelbourne to put them through into the semi-final. So it's all to play for, and it's going to be a fascinating weekend next week.
Yeah, for sure. And before we talk about the men's League of Ireland, David, first there's a lot of transfer news involving Republic of Ireland players at the moment, and the one that was confirmed, I think, was 2 hours after we recorded last week's podcast. And this is how timing always works: you record something, and then somebody drops an interesting bit of news that you would have liked to talk about. But anyway, we'll talk about it now, a week on. And Chiedozie Ogbene going to Luton Town, and it's a good move from him, it seems, in terms of the reaction from all quarters. But the interesting thing looking at it, he has been signed as a forward or a wide forward, and given how he has developed in recent times, especially the influence of Stephen Kenny, that's important for his development, it seems.
Yeah, I think on his performances for Ireland, he's always been excellent when he's played, and no doubt those international performances has helped get him to move into the Premier League. What I'd hope is that he just gets enough game time to show what he can do. You want Irish players playing as high as possible. He has the opportunity to do that now. It's just about making sure that he gets the game time, that he really takes advantage of it. Because for Ireland, where obviously Liam Brady's comment a couple of weeks ago that it's one of our weakest squads ever, whether that's right or not, we need more players playing in the Premier League and playing regularly. So the couple that have moved, and we'll talk about the others probably, but it's good to see Irish players moving into the Premier League and even moving clubs where they might get more game time, and hopefully in the season to come, they all get as much game time as possible.
Yeah, and it's interesting that his move, because again with Rotherham United, he would have been a right wing back initially when he was there a couple of seasons ago, and then last season he ended up being moved further forward. But it's a strange one in the sense that actually it's his international career which seems to have impacted his position at club level. David, I mean, what do you make of him as a striker and how he's adapted? Because you obviously know that position really well, but going from right wing back to being a centre forward, it's a completely different mental shift.
Yeah, I think I remember obviously played against him here in the League of Ireland in his Limerick and Cork days. I always remember him as a kind of left winger coming inside. I think that won't be any big surprise to me to be playing that position, or it won't take much getting used to. He'll be well attuned to it, but he's just unbelievable athleticism. I think what he gives Ireland as a player who's able to get in behind teams and stretch teams is good pace and strength. And I think at times watching Ireland anyway, I think that's something we probably need, his ability to stretch teams, especially when you're trying to pass it and keep the ball. You need to have that option to be able to get in behind, and that might work well for him. Luton are obviously going to be big underdogs next season, and probably favourites to be one of the bottom 3. But if you're going to be a team that's going to play on the counter and be under pressure, then him as a forward player is the kind of guy that you'd need, and perhaps that's exactly what Luton are looking for, and hopefully it works out for him.
Yeah, and then Dara O'Shea also confirmed last week moving from West Brom to Burnley. So again, another player moving up to Premier League football. And Conan, I suppose looking at this, there's 2 advantages here for him. One being, of course, the fact he's going to be working with Vincent Kompany, one of the great centre-backs of recent times in the Premier League era. But the other, also his versatility in terms of game time, I'm sure it's going to be quite helpful.
Yeah, he's played over 100 games now for West Brom. I think 28 of them were in the Premier League when they got relegated a couple of years ago, the 2021 season. So I think it doesn't help Luke McNally's chances of playing regular first team football in the Premier League. Obviously, he was out on loan last year, and he's probably talk about going out on loan to the Championship again this year. But with Dara, I think it's a brilliant move for him. 24 years of age, coming into his prime. He's versatile. He does really, really well at international level as well. A bit like Ogbene. I'm sure Vincent had a look back at some clips of him at international level and seen how well he did. So I just think it's a situation now where you're going to have the international centre backs playing Premier League, especially with Nathan Collins move to Brentford with hopefully in the next couple of days or hours. But like, yeah, it's a great move from him. As I said, he's a really, really good player and well thought of, well regarded by his peers as well, but also by the coaching staff at West Brom. So, yeah, let's hope it's a great move from him.
Yeah, you mentioned Nathan Collins there, of course, and that kind of that back line in terms of their Premier League experience. Obviously, Nathan Collins already with Wolves, but looks like he's going to go for another Irish record transfer now. Last year, obviously, it was over 20 million to go to Wolves, and it looks like the mooted figure at the moment is 23 million pound to go to Brentford. And David, I mean, it's an interesting one for him because there was great hopes from last year when he went to Wolves, but it never really got up and running. Obviously, the sending off when he had that high challenge on Jack Grealish maybe stunted him a little bit, and then he ended up getting dropped towards the end of the season. And however, though, the fact that Brentford are coming in for him probably suggests like there is huge potential seen there.
Yeah, definitely. I think since he's come into the Irish team, he's been a big figure, and one of those that I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet. And yeah, I think Wolves kind of had a slow start to the season, and obviously as a big £20 million signing, the pressure was on a little bit probably, and performances, change of manager, performances improved. He sort of dropped out of the side, as I said, probably not helped by the red card, but it is promising that Brentford are willing to spend big on him, and you would hope they're only going to do that because they see themselves playing him every week. And as I said with Ogbene, I think that's the main thing for any of these lads is that they get in and they're consistently playing. And Dara O'Shea as well. Like I remember watching him early in his Ireland days, and he looked a real player. He had I think a horrible ankle injury. I can't remember the game, but it was just, you could see how bad it was going to be, and it obviously has kept him out for quite a while. But if those two are playing week in, week out, it'll make a big difference for Ireland, especially the way we're set up at the moment with 3 centre-halves. I think those two will be big players for Ireland. So hopefully they do get the game time that we all hope they do.
Yeah, and John Egan, of course, as well, promoted with Sheffield United, which completes sort of that back line. And then there's all this rumour about Andrew Omobamidele also potentially going from Norwich to Crystal Palace. There's a few players, Conan, like looking at the list, the amount of uncertainty within the Irish squad in terms of their futures. I mean, Caoimhín Kelleher, we talked about a couple of weeks ago. He definitely is somebody that needs a move for game time. Matt Doherty's future is a bit up in the air. As we mentioned, Omobamidele, in a different way, likely to be promoted up to the Premier League, or also there was rumours about AC Milan at one point. Jason Knight, another who certainly needs a move, and then Troy Parrott. It just seems to be a facet with the squad at the moment. There's a lot of about half of the Irish squad seem to be in a certain amount of uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think that's been the problem for Stephen Kenny at international level, is when we've players that are playing League One football and Championship football, and you're asking them to compete at international level. And it's going to be very, very difficult when they're not used to playing at that level. Like we talked about Ogbene, obviously, and he gave Theo Hernandez a difficult time at fullback in the France game. But that's just because of his pace and his power. Like if you're asking the likes of like Josh Cullen, for instance, Jason Knight, who's playing in League One, to come up against international superstars on a regular basis, it's going to be very, very difficult for them. So they need to be playing at a higher level. And with Jason Knight playing at Derby County, obviously they didn't get promoted, playing out of position initially when at the start of the season he was playing at right wing back, so not ideal. So we're looking for these players to move up leagues, and in order for our international standards to improve as well. But like you said, Caoimhín Kelleher has to get a move, not playing enough game time. Omobamidele, Adam Ida obviously suffered a few injuries as well. You'd like to see him getting regular first team football, be it in the Championship or further afield. Matt Doherty has another player that really needs to find consistency within a team. And in order if all that happens, if they can play regular first team football at the highest level possible, which is the Premier League or in top European leagues, well, then we can have a chance then at international football. But until then, I think we're going to stay where we are.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on those. I imagine with the nature of these things, there's going to be an announcement of some like major transfer about an hour after we finish recording here, and then have to talk about it next week. But anyway, in the meantime, let's talk about the SSC Airtricity Men's Premier Division. And at the weekend, Cork City and Drogheda United drew 1-1. Dundalk, one of the surprise results, beating Shamrock Rovers 2-0. Shelbourne and Derry City drawing 1-1. Sligo Rovers getting back to winning ways with a big win 3-1 over Bohemians, and then St. Pat's trashed UCD 7-0. And we'll talk about Mason Melia as well, because he added his name to the score sheet there, and in terms of his age, at the age of 15 as well, it's remarkable. But David, let's start on Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers, because I was watching this one live, and the first half it seemed like if the deadlock was going to be broken, it was going to be via mistake. But in the second half, what did Dundalk do right in terms of turning the game in their favour, and also what went wrong for Shamrock Rovers?
Yeah, it was a kind of game of fine margins. As I said, there wasn't massive amount of chances, particularly in the first half. I think Dundalk's closest is probably just Sean Hoare's header back to the goalkeeper and a bit of miscommunication, and Sean Hoare has to clear it off the line. So I think Dundalk have slowly built a good run of results together, and listened to O'Donnell over the last few weeks. He just felt they needed to combine a good first half performance, a good second half performance, and that's probably what they did. They evened out the game in the way they set up, kind of matched up in formation wise, and tried to nullify Rovers. But I think, over the last years, I don't think Rovers have particularly enjoyed playing in Oriel just with the pitch, and they've generally gone a little bit more direct than they might do at home in Tala. And at times that's worked for them. Earlier in the season, obviously they won up there 4-0 with Dundalk down to 10, but generally it's not been a great ground for them. And Dundalk just kind of nullified them, and I think took advantage second half, a brilliant goal from Louis Ainsley, someone who's missed a huge chunk of the season through kind of illness, and now that he's back, he's been a big miss for them. Even with Andy Boyle out, he's had to step in and took his goal brilliantly, a little 1-2 breaking from the back with Keith Ward and fired at home. So I think the Dundalk just finding their feet a little bit. Injuries obviously have helped. They've had lads back. I think Benson really the only one missing now at the moment, but the worry for them is probably their squad is thin. With Tulloch, his loan is up. Waziri Williams' loan is up. They're coming into Europe now as well. I'm sure O'Donnell would love a bit of investment to try and get some more players in, and I think the club need to back them, and especially on the back of a good run of results, to go into Europe in good form, and hopefully they can continue what's been a good European record over the years. But it was a brilliant performance for them, a great result for them, and Rovers, it's hard. Nobody's quite pushing them hard enough to really put them under pressure, because I was looking at the stats. They've drawn 7 and lost 4 so far this year. And last year they drew 7 and lost 5 in the whole season. So their form has certainly dipped, but they're still comfortable leaders at the moment.
Yeah, and as you mentioned with Dundalk as well, in terms of backing the manager and getting players in, Rayan Tulloch has been one who has been impressive this season, but he's now returning to West Brom as his loan comes to an end. Now, he wasn't involved in the win over Shamrock Rovers due to suspension, but just how big a blow is his departure, because he seemed to bring a little bit of wizardry that maybe was missing elsewhere.
Yeah, they have Daniel Kelly, who missed big portions of the season back, so that's a help. They've Ryan O'Kane there, John Martin there, but I think Tulloch was something a little bit different. He was a sort of spark out of nothing. He could produce a goal from nothing when you're maybe struggling in a game. I remember being at the Shels game with Conan, we covered the game, and they were kind of struggling to break Shels down, and a bit of magic from Tulloch produced. He won a penalty earlier in the game, and he produced a goal. So he had that just a little bit of extra quality that any side in the league will be delighted to have. So he will be a miss. And as I said, I think the murmurs at the moment there's kind of nothing lined up in terms of signings in July, but I think they will certainly need minimum 2 or 3 players to come in and just help the squad, because if they lose another 2 or 3 to injury like they have earlier in the season, they'll struggle for numbers. And I think that's probably a lot of clubs in the same position, the likes of Drogheda and that have lost other key players, so they're not the only club. But yeah, they certainly need to try and find the right people now, particularly coming into Europe.
Yeah, and then Sligo Rovers, Conan, they were coming into this, what turned out to be a victory over Bohemians, off the back of a pretty damaging defeat and unexpected also defeat to UCD. But the way they've responded, and looking at the goals as well, I think, there's a brilliant team goal for the first one scored by Barlow. The second one, obviously, it's a mistake by the Bows goalkeeper. But the third one, a really good hit from Radoslajevic. that's probably not the type of football you would expect with a team under pressure. So probably it's quite of a testament to them as well that they were able to play the way they did when, you know, all the spotlight is on them in that way.
Yeah, look, they needed to win the game, as you said. They were on the back of 4 poor results. They lost to UCD, they lost to Shamrock Rovers, they lost to Bows, and they drew with Shels. And they needed to pick up a result, and they did so. They did really, really well, and they got their goals. And obviously Talbot helped them with their second one. But great to see Barlow with his first goal for the club. Max Mata as well. His first goal in 9, but he's second top scorer behind Chris Forrester in the league with 10 goals this season. So really, really good. Must win game. And as I said, they're away to Derry now on Friday, which is another tough game. But yeah, it was just something that even the crowd at Sligo, they can get on your backs very, very quickly. Especially Sligo have lofty ambitions. They want to play in Europe every season, and doesn't look like it this year. So it was very, very important that they got back to winning ways and quickly. Like if Drogheda had held on against Cork the other night, they would have been level on points with Sligo. So, and again, dragging them down into that relegation playoff. And Sligo want to be aiming forward. And with that win, it leaves them 5 points behind Shels in 6th place. But at least it pushes them closer to them. And yeah, look, they're a difficult team to beat in the showgrounds over the years, and David will be a testament to that. He played down there, but it's very, very difficult for them at the moment, because their form, both home and away, isn't good enough. And but that win over Bows, going back off the break as well, you'd like to think that they'll push on, but again, a very, very tough game up in the Brandywell this Friday.
Yeah, David, just on Sligo as well, just in terms of what Conan said there about, you know, I guess the atmosphere when times are a little bit more difficult there, and just how tough it can be as a player.
Yeah, I think it can be, definitely. I think you probably say the same about a few clubs. I think Conan said they do have lofty ambitions. They expect to be in Europe. You know, they're happy to spend money and bring players in. It's a tough gig, because often you're bringing players in from abroad. You're not 100% sure what you're going to get. We've seen that this year. There's some brilliant, you know, Hartman, Radosavich, there's brilliant talents there, but it's trying to get the most out of them and make sure they're committed to the cause. And yeah, the game, I thought, you know, Sligo did very well off the back of what has been really, really poor performances, and they would have felt the pressure a little bit, I'm sure. Bohemians, on the other hand, seem to be in a bit of a free fall. I mean, there's 1 win and 9 from the start that they had. I'm sure Decky's a little bit concerned, and they need to try and kick on. It's an interesting one this week. They'll play the Dock, so a team in form, but Bows really need to pull a result out of somewhere and try and get back, you know, get the wheels back on the wagon, because it just has been a poor sort of run for them. But yeah, credit to Sligo, and a couple of really good goals in the game in terms of finishes. But from Bows' point of view, I mean, first goal is just a really sloppy header from Nowak, just gives possession away, like really fine margins. It's a simple header into his midfielder, gives it away. Second goal comes from a, you know, throw in. McDonald just totally misjudges a clearance. So I mean, we're looking at Talbot, but even before that, it's a really poor mistake, and then can't really forgive the mistake from Talbot. So it's kind of a comedy of errors, and if Bows want to get back to where they were, they need to really improve and kind of clean those errors up.
Yeah, and from a Bows point of view as well, Conan, I mean, it's interesting. Afolabi's goal was actually eerily similar to the one he scored against Shamrock Rovers, almost a carbon copy, and that might be one of the green shoots that maybe now he's starting to find his feet in terms of goal scoring.
Yeah, but he needs service. Like Connolly and Twardek, look, they've never pleased me with their end product since they've come in, and like they're very direct. But when it gets down to it, it's like they rush their crosses when they need to take their time. They have the pace to get beyond their fullbacks and put decent balls into the box, and it just doesn't happen regularly enough. So if I was Afolabi, I'd be tearing my hair out that I haven't got 10 goals this season, because he's strong, he's glad to finish. And he's shown that. He hasn't missed gilt-edged chances this season. He just hasn't. The service hasn't been good enough. And like David said, 1 win in 9 games, 7 points out of a possible 27. It's not good enough from considering where they were. They're second last in the form table. UCD behind them. Obviously, Sligo caught up with them, level on points with them. So 1 shot on target in the whole game was the goal. Yeah, so big game against Dundalk. Like they're who are absolutely flying at the moment.
Yeah, and in that battle that Sligo are in, sort of to avoid the relegation playoff spot at the moment, Cork and Drogheda, of course, are involved in that, and they drew 1-1, as I said earlier. And David, I mean, looking at it, Adam Foley scores a good goal early on, and this is where, with a situation where his loan has come to an end, so there's going to be a lot of onus on Foley.
Yeah, Draper kind of just really got going. It started the season, he wasn't scoring goals, but I saw him play in Oriel, and he was a real handful, just physical, and put himself about, worked exceptionally hard. Such a good young player. Interesting to see how his career goes, whether he'll get game time back at Lincoln, or whether I'm sure there's clubs here that'll be trying to get him back again. But he will be a big miss. In fairness to Foley, he took his goal really, really well. Left foot, clever finish, good ball from Ryan Brennan. I think Drogheda were, from the highlights of the stats, they looked like they were well on top in this game and should have probably been out of sight. They'll be disappointed not to take a 3 points after the way they performed, but I think that'll be okay. They have a lot of I like Markey, and a clever player. He seemed to be involved in a lot in the game. Dylan Grimes, they've got good creative players. Gary Deegan behind them. I think what I like about Drogheda is they kind of have a consistent bunch who seem to always be fit and able to play, and they sort of work around those 5 or 6 key players that's in their squad. And as you said, they will miss Draper, and I think Awi is gone as well, so they'll miss those two. But trust Kevin Doherty to find another couple of gems and bring them in July and keep Drogheda taking over. They sort of got dragged. Cork's really good results. I think they've nearly 4 wins on the bounce, kind of caught them up. But if the game on Friday was anything to go by, I think Drogheda will probably stay clear of Cork. But I'm sure Drogheda will have Sligo on their side. So it's an interesting battle down that end as well. Those 3 or 4 teams down near the kind of playoff place are in an interesting battle. For Cork, it's to try and to keep with them now. As I said, they had a good run of form, but since then it's been a bit of a dip, and I think Liam Buckley's been confirmed till the end of the season, so he'll want to bolster the squad as well and see can they catch Drogheda and catch the likes of Sligo.
Yeah, and also speaking of gems, in the St. Pat's game, of course, 7-0 win over UCD, Conan, but Mason Melia is the one that will grab all the headlines. I mean, the youngest ever League of Ireland goal scorer for Pats there, age of 15, which is, it's hard to get one's head around it. Now, he will score better goals than the one he scored against UCD, but this is somebody we were talking about in regards to the Ireland under-17s, because he was one of the jewels in the crown of that team that got to the knockout stage. You might tell us a little bit about him in terms of his development and the potential that is there, because he's obviously he's hitting a lot of markers already at this age, and there's still a long way to go, but there's huge potential there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, from Wicklow, like he's a fantastic prospect. We've seen that at the under-17 tournament where he was absolutely brilliant, and he can still play that age group for another year. And it was just so delighted for him in the sense that he's been trying so hard over the last number of weeks to break this record. He wanted to be the youngest goal scorer, and finally got it. And as you said, it just looked as if it just tipped a tiny bit over the line, but they all count, as David would say, as a striker himself. But you're not going to care what type of goal you score once it's your first. The monkey's off the back now. He can go on and try and score more before the end of the season, because he's willing to get chances, and John Daly is willing to give chances to those players. Even Rhys Bartley, he's the first player from St. Pat's to play 13s, 14s, 15s, 17s and 19s to play first team. And it just shows the development. And with Pats over the years, they have done that, with David mentioned Dara Markey there. He came through the ranks, looks at Jamie McGrath as well. So you will always have that chance at St. Pat's to break through. And it's a testament to players that have come through that system, and the coaches, the under-8 coaches that are there, and the development that's within the club. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to see. And even Tom Lonergan as well, scoring a brace. They were his first 2 goals for the club. They were the only thing missing from his performances since the start of the season. He's been excellent. And to get the 2 goals was great. But Pats themselves they're on a great run of form. Best home form in the league, 25 points from the 12 games. Home to Cork on Friday. Liam Buckley going back to Richmond Park. They're probably, after their performance on Friday, he was very disappointed in their performance. Speaking to the media after the game, so they're going to have to regroup, reinforce their squad big time. Tiernan Brooks is meant to be coming in from Notts County as well. I think that's been confirmed, so that's a good sign for them, because that's an area that they needed to strengthen. But with Pats, yeah, it's onwards and upwards. Fantastic since John Daly has come in, doing really, really well. Won 8 of 11 games since he's took over. So yeah, you can't argue with that.
Yeah, and with Pat sort of looking upwards, there's a sense, David, that Derry are drifting a little bit, at least in terms of results. And even when you look at the table, there's a sense maybe they could even be looking behind them more than they would be looking forwards.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sticky one for Derry. You know, they're kind of the team that are just disappointing the most of late. I think each week you feel they should win games, and they're losing and drawing them. And I think they've 1 win in 7, which for the squads that they've assembled, you'd never really expect from them. Now, there's no doubt they've huge players out at the moment, and they really have struggled probably more than anyone with injuries this season. You know, even on their bench, I think they had 3 senior outfield players on their bench really that were realistic subs. So that is a struggle for them, no doubt. But you know, the last couple of performances, just, you know, they've had a lot of the ball, they have a lot of possession, but they don't really seem to create too much. They don't. I know I've spoken before about, you know, they'll miss Colin Whelan, but at the moment they're not even really creating chances that if he was on the pitch, you'd say, oh, well, he'd take that. You know, other strikers are missing things. It's even their goal the other night, it comes from, you know, Brandon Cavan a ball into the box, which is just a real hopeful ball. It's nothing of real quality. And fairness to Cian Cavan, you know, he's a big, strong striker. He makes the most of it. He sort of gets contact with Paddy Barrett to just free up the ball for a brilliant finish from Doherty. But it's not, they don't seem to be cutting teams open, even with large spells of possession. I know they played Rovers last week and had a lot of the ball, but I think had 1 shot in the game. So that's the disappointing thing, and I think everybody expected them to challenge Rovers this year, and you'd hope that there's a title race. It certainly looks like Pats would be the closest at the moment, but hopefully Derry can get players back, the likes of Michael Duffy, McElhenney, Wheel Patching, players of real quality, and if they can get those back, I think they'll start to create more opportunities and score more goals and ultimately win more games. But it's certainly a sticky spell for them.
Yeah, and on the other side of that 1-1 draw with Derry City, of course, were Shelbourne, and it was a sort of momentous day earlier where I think we finally got to hear from the new majority shareholder, which is Acun Ilicali, who comes from Turkey and has been the owner of Hull City as well. Now, we're going to play a couple of clips here, but it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on what it means for the club. But let's listen to his a part of his chat with Shane Dawson of RTÉ Sports, just on the priorities he has for the club before we talk about Tolka Park and other areas.
In terms of your investment, what's the priority? Would it be the footballing side of things in terms of players? Would it be player development with the academy? Or would it be facilities both within Tolka Park and the AUL complex as well?
Yeah, first of all of it. I mean, all of them, of course. But number 1 is the squad, for sure. First of all, the team has to progress, and the team has to have success. This is like the fire of the oven. When your fire is bigger, then when you cook more, it's a big advantage that the restaurant becomes full. Then everything starts going one to another. So first of all, success on the pitch is very important, and for the success, the facilities of the playing ground is very important. So our first target is first of all the success on the pitch. But the other ones, all of them are very important for us, of course, and we are just planning so many things in detail about our stadium, and of course our fan base being bigger. So many things we're gonna keep on going one to another.
You mentioned in the press conference that your goals and ambitions will be to increase attendances at Shelbourne, to increase crowds. You also mentioned that perhaps it could be a 10, 20,000 capacity or benchmark even. With that, would it be your personal preference for that to be at Tolka Park, or have you at all investigated or looked at moving Shelbourne anywhere else?
Actually, I mean, everything should be natural, you know. At the moment, Tolka Park is okay, of course, and for the close future, I can say that there is a certain capacity can be enlarged, and if it works, it's gonna work. But if we are talking about a very bright future, if we are making our fan base so bigger and bigger, and if there is a very important limitation in the stadium that you cannot enlarge it more, so what can you do? I mean, otherwise you will lose so much energy out of the stadium. So for the long future, there is a possibility that if everything goes very good and this team needs thousands and thousands, we need to put them in a stadium. But for the as a medium future, I would say we just, of course, concentrate on talk about enlargement.
All right, that is Acun Ilicali. So he is now the majority shareholder of Shelbourne. You can watch that full interview with Shane Dawson on YouTube and also on RTÉ.ie now. Conan, I mean, Shelbourne have been crying out for investment, and they're not the only club in the League of Ireland, of course, in that sort of situation, because he was linked with Dundalk previously. What do you make of his arrival, and I suppose his consortium's arrival as well, at Shelbourne, and what it means for the club as well? Because he's been at pains to point out that it's not going to be a feeder team necessarily to Hull City, even if the clubs do have a sort of a working relationship in terms of occasionally players moving across from one to the other.
Well, Raf, the club needed investment, and as they've been crying out for the last 18 months, 2 years, probably even longer. And Andrew Doyle has done a fantastic job since he's come in. He got the club back up into the Premier Division. Some astute signings as well. And David O'Connor is, first of all, as CEO, but even bringing in Damien Duff as manager was a huge appointment at the time, because it brought great awareness to the club. So that those we can't forget the role that the previous owners had at the club, and they're very, very happy to pass the mantle on now to Ilicali. So hopefully it goes well. Yeah, look, I like to see the long-term plan, and my long-term plan at a club would always be from the bottom up, not from the top down. So when he goes, but I can see the point of strengthening the squad, trying to get into Europe, because we all know the money that's involved in that. But I'd like to see the grassroots and the academy structures put in place first. And if that can go on a par with strengthening the squad, well, that would be fantastic. We've seen the Talca Park and its dilapidated state. One of the stands can't be used at all. So they're already losing revenue there by not being having supporters put in that ground. So that'll be a starting point. But yeah, with the squad progression as well, they need to sign players in order to put themselves higher up the table. They don't score enough goals, and that's evident. They don't concede many either. But I think Damien Duff is very, very aware of the squad that he has, and they make themselves very, very hard to beat. And because they make themselves very hard to beat, they find themselves struggling at the top end of the pitch. Now with Sean Boyd back, obviously, I was at the game on Friday night, and Ilicali, he got a wonderful reception, not just from the Irish supporters, but from Turkish fans as well, who were wearing the Fenerbahce jerseys in the ground. I even saw some Hull City jerseys. So no, it was great reception that he got from the fans. So the fans seemed to be fully behind him, which is marvellous. That's what you want. But within the game itself, Shels should have won the game. Jack Moylan had 3 wonderful chances to score. I've always said that he's such a wonderful talent, but he just doesn't score enough goals from his positions on the pitch. But he creates so much problems for opponents with his strength and his technical ability on the ball. And even with Jad Hakiki as well coming through, he came off the bench and he was very direct. And we mentioned Tulloch earlier on. Dave mentioned how good he was, and I think we're crying out for more direct wingers in the League of Ireland. There's not many anymore. Obviously, Michael Duffy's injured; he's not doing it. But at the moment, but like, we're getting players, and even in games where the opportunity is to put a ball into the box, and they don't do that. And I don't know whether it's just me being grumpy now that I've retired, but it could be. Is it got to do with stats? They don't want to lose possession of the ball, and because it comes up in their stats that they gave the ball away. But there's plenty of opportunities that I've been at games this season where a winger has the ball, goes by his man, and he checks back and gives it back to the fullback rather than whip it across the box. Like I played on the right wing, and if the left winger did that, I'd be screaming at them. And I'm sure Dave, as a centre forward, would be screaming at him, because you can only make the same run so many times. You know, you kind of have to alter your run, and then fitness kind of plays a part. But yeah, I just that's my rant over there on wingers. But I think Shels deserved to win the game on Friday. JJ Lunny in the middle of the park, I think he's very, very underrated, probably the most underrated player in the league. Dictated the whole game from his position as in the 6. they need to keep him. And the other thing is that when Ilicali came in as owner, the first job he was to do was to nail down Conor Kearns. So they extended his contract as well for another year, which was great news for Shels. So they've brought in Tony O'Neill now as community development manager. Huge appointment. He was with Shamrock Rovers through their rise. So he's already out in North Dublin area visiting schools and visiting football clubs, which is offering free coaching sessions to football clubs, which is great facility. They're not looking for anything in return. So these things will get bums on seats, and that is needed at Talca Park. But yeah, I think they need to look from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Yeah, and speaking of Talca Park, as it was addressed in the press conference, both in the live section and then in the extended embargoed section for the newspapers after. So before the press conference, there had already been talk about Shels being close to purchasing the ground from Dublin City Council, and then expanding on that, then Andrew Doyle said, "We're continuing with the negotiation with DCC. That obviously takes time. We're committed to the process." And then he added that Talca Park will not just be renewed, it will be reimagined. And then I'll just play this clip before I get your thoughts, David. But this was Tan Kessler, who Ilicali had billed in the press conference with a bit of a laugh that this is his Mr. Operations, who is going to be, and in quotes, Mr. Operations, who's going to be looking after the operative matters of the club. And he's an executive board member who's also been involved at Hull City. But let's just listen to both of them discussing the issue of Talca Park.
Stadium is something very sacred to the club. We were speaking with the board members and also our coach as well. How he mentioned that he played when he was here when he was young. So a lot of exciting things will happen. The chairman will also mention it. But as far as the technicality, how it's going to be done, I think it's too early to commit to an answer. So it's. To give you an understanding, Talca Park is special for our club, and there will be some improvements in the future, I believe. But we're still working on it.
But by the way, I have to just mention something. When we bought Hull City, the average attendance was almost 8,000 for the team. So as I say, we love taking teams with potential and to lift them higher. So now, last game of the season, we played to 23,000 in Hull City, and our expectation average is 20,000 this year. So why we did this Hull City operation was the potential that we saw, and it was obvious. I see the same here too. If you ask me, it's not something unlogical that this team will in the future play to over 10,000 fans, 15,000 fans, because this country has the potential. As an island, you are very good in football. So that means that if a national team is successful in football, that means that people love football. So we are in the center of the country. So that means that the football lovers are searching for, of course, motivation. That's all. So our aim is to motivate our fans and to make the fan base bigger. Especially, we're going to concentrate on the kids. For me, I love kids, and I love their coming to the games, their energy. So we will just motivate the young people, the kids, and everybody, so that we can just have more and more fans. So if you ask me what is the potential here, if everything goes good, over 10,000, over 20,000 is possible in this country. A football game can be watched easily.
All right, so that is Acun Ilicali again, but before that, Tan Kessler, who's an executive board member. And David, as Conan said, Talca Park definitely needs work, and that has to be a key cornerstone for the club going forward, especially in the wake of the the Save Talca Park campaign, and I suppose the tradition that exists between, I suppose, the club and then obviously its main point of infrastructure.
Yeah, I think there is elements of watching back to Peak Six coming in at Dundalk, and I don't mean that overly in a negative point of view, but they don't want to overly commit and make big commitments at this stage. I think there's a lot of moving parts, particularly with Talca Park, and spoke about negotiations with Dublin City Council, and there's no point in saying we're going to redevelop this into a big stadium without really doing your research and working hard behind the scenes to see if that's really possible. And there's no doubt, I think across the league, we want improved stadiums and improved facilities. I don't expect somebody to come in one day and commit 2 or 5 million into a stadium. That mightn't even be the right decision, as he spoke about, that you need to grow your fan base and provide the facilities that you actually require. If Shels can manage to get 5,000 out of games consistently, then provide a stadium for 6,000 or 7,000 that you can grow a little bit and do it stage by stage. I think that's the right process. And look, if they can get ownership of Talca and make those improvements little by little, I think that's the first step. And there's no need to make a master plan in the first week of ownership. I think it's just improving things. As Conan said, I mean, you speak about, improving things on the pitch, and that can go wrong sometimes. That you might spend a lot of money and you just don't get a team that works. It happened with us in the Duck, and big money was spent. It doesn't always mean success. So, if they can make improvements in their academy and in the younger age groups, similar to how Rovers have done it and begun to dominate the league, I think that's a good example for Shels to follow. And I think it's little by little. There's no need for any major jump in. And I'd be more impressed if the guy says he's going to make tweaks as he goes, rather than offering grand solutions. I think that's not always the answer. That I know fans want big money spent, but it's got to be done in stages and increments, and make those improvements across the board. And it looks promising. I mean, his track record, I think that the fan base in Hull are overwhelmingly in favour of his ownership and how he's done things in Hull. So you can only go off that really if you're a Shels fan, and I think that's probably helped in terms of what Conan mentioned, the reaction he would have got on Friday night. So it certainly looks good for Shels. I think any League of Ireland fan will always have a little bit of scepticism from all the issues that changes of ownerships have caused over the years. So there'll always be a wee bit of scepticism, but the track record looks good, and hopefully it's positive things for Shelbourne and for League of Ireland football in general.
Yeah, and before we go, just in regard to the first division, so Friday night, Cove Ramblers won 3-2 at Athlone Town, and then Galway United beat Kerry 1-0. Treaty United and Bray Wanderers drew 1-1, and Waterford trashed Finn Harp 6-1. And then Saturday, Longford Town beat Wexford 2-1. But Conan, I suppose, looking at this division, the story feels like it's been told a long, long time ago. I mean, the gap is huge between first and second, and then there's just a big block between, in the battle for the playoff places, and it feels like nothing has really changed from like the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season.
It just goes to show how important the playoff system is, Raf, because otherwise we wouldn't be looking at the first division at all. It's you consider itself it's over, like 13 points. They've only Galway have only conceded 8 goals all season in 21 games. It's pretty remarkable what they're doing here. They've only drawn 1 and lost 1 all season. So but fair play, and a lot of people were kind of sniggering when John Caulfield appointed Ollie Horgan as his assistant, thinking that, what is it, a good move? What type of football would they play? But they're absolutely dominating teams. Now, they only got a 1-0 win on Friday, but at the same against Kerry. But at the same time, they're still chipping away, getting the 3 points week in, week out. And Waterford are trying to stay with them, and even then, there's a 10-point gap between second and third. So it's like you kind of want to keep calling it a 2-horse race, but it's very, very difficult with the games going on to continue doing that. It's really difficult. But I just think are just absolutely flying, and fair play to them.
Yeah, and David, I suppose a final point. If we're to pick a standout, I guess it'd be Cove Ramblers and Shane Keegan. The work has been done down there. Yeah,
I've worked with Shane in Dundalk, and he's a passionate man for every sport. I think the GAA, the hard-working fella. He's done it before in the first division, and he's producing good results with Cove. They've improved massively this season. But it's a battle there for the playoff spots. That's really, I suppose, what everybody's watching now at this point. There isn't probably a whole lot more to be decided. I'd say even in Waterford, they probably just need to keep the foot to the pedal to be in good form for what looks like it'll be playoff games. Galway's side just reminds me of Cork. I think it was 2017, just eking out wins. Even if they don't play well, they'll pull out a 1-0 win, and as Conan said, if you're building off a base of 8 goals conceded in 21 games or whatever it might be, any team going in to face them now, they're in for a tough task. So it's a brilliant job. It looks like it's easy, just keep steamrolling teams to keep winning games, but that takes a lot of preparation, a lot of hard work. And I know how driven John was to try and win the league this year after disappointment last season. And he's put a good side together. That's just a team of winners now at this point. They probably gone into every game now and they're going to win it. And they could have it wrapped up with a few weeks to spare.
Yeah, for sure. But that pretty much brings us to a close for this week. And also you can watch Ireland v France, the send-off game before the team head off to the World Cup, live on RT2 and RT Player on Thursday from 7:30 p.m. But David and Conan, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks, Raf.
Thanks, Raf.